Thank you very much. Yes, I think we do have some time for questions. My colleague Kia here has a microphone, so hands up if anyone would like to ask a question. If you could keep them short, we can try to squeeze in as many as possible. Kia, would you like to? Thank you.
George, thanks so much for a very insightful talk. I was just wondering about the Belt and Road Initiative and how that fits into the of end game for Chinese economic policy.
Well, Belt and Road Initiative, I'm sure lots of people know this. It was Xi Jinping's foreign policy creation in 2013. It actually, in terms of what it was originally doing, which was financing of infrastructure in other countries, including in Europe, it actually peaked in about 2016, 2017. After that, the Chinese government got very kind of wary about some of what they thought was frivolous foreign investment, which Chinese companies were embarked on in terms of, gambling, commercial property, football clubs. There are lots of things that they were became a little bit kind of restive about. And then, there was this kind of period when people were kind of curious about whether China was actually embarking on a period of what they called, or a program of debt, diplomacy. In other words, to get countries deeper into debt so that they would become beholden to Chinese political will and so on and so forth. I think that was probably a little bit of an exaggeration, to be honest. Many people talked about Sri Lanka in this regard and the port of Hambantota. But in any event, to answer your question directly, the nature of the Belt and Road has changed since 2017-18. Obviously, went through a bit of a hiatus over COVID. But for Xi Jinping, I think the BRI is still pretty important, but it's no longer really as much about infrastructure financing. But it is about trying to find markets for Chinese goods. It is about accessing raw materials, including oil, gas. And it is about the bifurcation of technology standards and protocols, for example, where, you can use, for example, as everybody knows, there are certain, aspects of technology which you can't use in China. And there are other aspects of, Chinese technology that we don't allow in our countries now. So, for example, I think the British government has outlawed the use of electric cars in the government service because of data transfer issues and security and so on and so forth. So this bifurcation of products, technologies, national security related issues is definitely something where obviously China feels and wants to develop its BRI relationships because it's commercially makes a lot of sense for them to try to steal a march over the West and vice versa. So yeah, I think it's still pretty important, but for different reasons from what it was.
Any further questions? Could we maybe have...
Thank you very much again for a great talk. We saw earlier about how so many countries have implemented trade restrictions on China, or they tried to reduce China's enormous joining surplus, but so far they haven't been successful. I don't know if you saw, but economist Michael Pettis was in the White House last week. Do you think that America or any other country is going to actually manage to shut down China's surplus, stop accepting their massive capital outflows, and turn around their exporting of demand in the last few years?
Well, no, I don't think I had seen that, but yeah, kind of fits the script. I think I don't think there's anything that certainly not. I don't think there's anything the United States can do. In other words, Trump's tariff policy is completely, in my judgment, kind of wrongly framed as a means of trying to contain China's surplus. Because we know, for example, that during the course of this year, exports to America have dropped by over 20%, maybe over 25%. And yet China's surplus is still booming. And the reason that it's booming is because exports may have not, that shipping exports directly from the PRC to the United States has jumped off a cliff, but actually the transshipment of goods and the rerouting of goods and the increased investment in foreign manufacturing by foreign and Chinese firms in Asian countries and Mexico and other countries. This is really, basically the goods are getting into the United States, but they're just coming from Vietnam and Thailand and Mexico. So the use of tariffs, it can change patterns of trade between countries, of course, but it can't really change the underlying imbalances in trade, because the underlying imbalances in trade aren't about taxes and tariffs. They're really about savings and investment in your economy and other people's economies. So this is something which I think the Trump administration, there are people like the Treasury Secretary who do understand it, but it's not really kind of where they're at. So I don't think that this will be a very successful venture at all in terms of closing of imbalances. But I do think that if countries, continue to resent the influx of cheap Chinese imports because they fear what the impact of these will be on their domestic textile industry or steel industry or EV industry, I think cumulatively, as we go through the next, rest of the decade, I think this will have an impact on China. It will certainly have an impact on Chinese behavior, I think. It's kind of a watch this space. But I think in terms of the fundamental reason why we have a trade war, which is, to do with the Chinese surplus, that's not really being addressed. Chinese don't want to address it, and the Americans can't.
There's a question from a member of the online audience who unfortunately didn't give us their name, but would like to thank you for the talk. And the question is, in your opinion, do the industries in MIC or MiG-25 operate as state-backed monopolies, using BYD as an example?
Not really. There's a question mark about what is a private company in China. Just looking at the way companies are registered and incorporated doesn't necessarily mean they're private in the way that we understand private companies to be. But that said, BYD is a private company. It is not true. And DeepSeek, certainly is a private company. It was founded by a hedge fund proprietor. So, in fact, it is the antithesis, actually, of Chinese industrial policy. So there's no question that there are successful companies in China that are not part of the state enterprise system. No question at all. Tencent, Alibaba, Xiaomi, a number of others. There are a lot of companies that you've probably never heard of who make the cellular modules that basically garner and transfer and swap data in your fridge, in your radio, in whatever it happens to be. All of these things, this is a preserve of companies that are certainly incorporated in China as private companies, not the big state enterprises. But having said that, of course, the state enterprises are the huge beneficiaries of a lot of this annual expenditure of 6 or 7% of GDP on below market financing and subsidies and government guidance funds and goodness knows what else. So all of these things are true.
Thank you. I think this is all we've got time for. But before we leave tonight, can I just make you aware we've got 3 more episodes of this Modern China series. The next one will be on the 27th of November, a lunchtime lecture again by Professor Steve Zhang. And then we've got 2 more, one on modern Chinese art and one on modern Chinese documentary films. So I hope you can join us for that. But for tonight, can you please help me put your hands together for Professor Marcos? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.